Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're unpacking Nvidia's latest earnings call.
Yeah, a real barn burner of a quarter.
$35.1 billion in revenue. That's a 94% jump year over year.
It's crazy how they're just crushing it.
Absolutely insane, especially when you see the data center business brought in over $30 billion.
It's actually 0.8 to be exact.
Okay, let's break this down.
Where to even begin?
How about with that H200 chip? Everyone's talking about it.
Colette Kress, Nvidia's CFO, said it best. H200s reached double-digit billions, making it the fastest product ramp in the company's history.
Double-digit billions. Talk about demand.
Well, these chips are basically built for AI.
Double the inference performance.
And 50% better cost of ownership than the previous generation. No wonder everyone wants them.
I'd imagine the cloud providers are pretty happy.
Oh, absolutely. They made up half of Nvidia's data center sales, and their revenue more than doubled year over year.
So it's not just the big names like AWS and Azure.
Nope, even regional cloud providers are seeing massive growth. AI infrastructure is a global phenomenon.
Feels like everyone's jumping on board. Let's shift gears a bit, though, and talk about what the analysts were saying.
Things got interesting during the Q&A for sure.
Any skeptical voices?
Well, CJ Muse from Cantor Fitzgerald brought up that whole debate about whether large language model scaling has hit a wall.
That's a big question for NVIDIA. What was their response?
Jensen, NVIDIA's CEO, tackled it head-on. He admitted that while pre-training scaling's still going strong,
Right.
there are these two other methods gaining traction: post-training and inference time scaling.
So it's not a standstill, but more of an evolution in how we develop and use these models.
Exactly.
So that means the demand for NVIDIA's infrastructure will probably keep growing.
That's the message they're sending, at least. And this brings us to Blackwell.
Blackwell. Everyone's talking about Blackwell.
And for good reason.
Their next-gen chip architecture, right?
Designed from the ground up to handle the demands of AI infrastructure. Super customizable, with some significant performance boosts over Hopper, and works seamlessly with x86 and Grace CPUs.
Sounds impressive. But new architecture often means new problems.
Oh yeah, definitely. Toshiya Hari from Goldman Sachs asked specifically about potential heating issues.
Given how powerful these chips are, I'm not surprised.
Jensen assured everyone that production is full steam ahead, with shipments even exceeding initial estimates.
Glad to hear it.
And, they have both air-cooled and liquid-cooled options, so there's flexibility depending on the data center setup.
Good to know. But how will this impact NVIDIA's bottom line?
Well, Colette Kress did say that although demand for Blackwell is staggering, the initial ramp-up will probably bring gross margins down.
Down to what?
Somewhere in the low 70s.
That's quite a dip.
She attributed it to the complexity of Blackwell, 7 custom chips, all those configurations for air and liquid cooling. It adds up.
So investors need to pay close attention to how this all plays out.
Definitely. But Colette did say that once Blackwell is fully up and running, they expect margins to rebound to the mid-70s.
That's slightly reassuring.
But then there's the question of what happens to Hopper.
Right, is it going extinct?
Not quite. Jensen said demand for Hopper will stay strong at least through the first few quarters of next year, running alongside the Blackwell rollout.
Okay, so a gradual transition, not a sudden shift.
Exactly. They're trying to manage it carefully.
Smart move. Let's zoom out a bit, though. Any discussion about the wider chip industry?
Actually, yes. Vivek Arya from Bank of America Securities brought up the idea of a digestion period in hardware deployment cycles.
Interesting. Basically, after a big upgrade, things slow down while everyone absorbs the new tech.
Right.
So is NVIDIA expecting that to happen with Blackwell?
Nope. Jensen argued that this time it's different.
How so?
He said the shift from traditional computing to machine learning is so fundamental that demand will likely keep exceeding supply.
So they're not expecting any slowdown.
He even said, quote, no digestion until the $1 trillion worth of existing data centers are modernized for AI.
Wow, that's a bold statement.
Definitely confident. But there are always risks and challenges, right?
I was just thinking that. What about the potential impact of the global economic slowdown? Did anyone bring that up?
Atif Malik from Citi noticed that although Nvidia had strong sell-through in Q3, their gaming revenue guidance for Q4 is actually down.
Is that a sign that gaming is cooling off?
Colette Kress clarified, it's more about supply chain constraints than lack of demand.
So they just can't keep up with all the orders?
Exactly. They're struggling to meet demand across all their product lines, and gaming seems to be taking a hit.
So a good problem to have in some ways.
Absolutely. It shows just how popular their products are.
But frustrating for gamers, I bet.
Definitely. But Colette did say they expect the supply chain to be back on track for gaming in the new year.
Okay, so overall, Nvidia is doing incredibly well, but there are some potential headwinds.
Exactly.
But what about their guidance for next quarter?
They're forecasting total revenue of 37.5 billion, plus or minus 2%.
Another huge jump.
Even with that expected dip in gross margins during the initial Blackwell ramp-up?
So another record-breaking quarter on the horizon.
Looks like it.
But can they keep this momentum going?
No, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's amazing to see how NVIDIA is basically shaping the whole future of computing.
Yeah, and speaking of shaping the future, Jensen had some really interesting things to say about how the computing landscape is changing.
He pointed out two key trends that are driving this global adoption of NVIDIA stuff. First, the shift from traditional coding to machine learning.
Makes sense. Machine learning is revolutionizing how we think about computing.
Totally. And the second trend is the crazy acceleration of AI, especially generative AI.
He actually called it the birth of a new industry.
Right. He even used the phrase AI factories, these massive data centers pumping out intelligence.
Like power plants for intelligence, basically.
Exactly. And NVIDIA is perfectly positioned to capitalize on this. They've got the full stack solutions, the expertise.
You're not just riding the wave, they're the ones building the surfboard.
Totally. And their customer base is so diverse, too. Hyperscale cloud providers, sovereign AI initiatives, even industrial robotics companies.
And speaking of nations, that whole sovereign AI thing was fascinating. It seems like countries are realizing they need their own AI capabilities.
Absolutely. Jensen talked about India, where the leading cloud providers are setting up these AI factories with thousands of NVIDIA GPUs.
It's incredible.
And Japan, too, where SoftBank is building this super powerful AI supercomputer using NVIDIA's DGX Blackwell and quantum InfiniBand tech.
Wow, sounds like a serious commitment to becoming an AI powerhouse.
It really does. And it opens up a whole new market for NVIDIA. They're not just selling chips anymore. They're helping countries build their own AI ecosystems.
It's like democratizing AI, making it available to everyone.
Yeah, that's the vision. But we can't forget about inference. That's a huge piece of the puzzle.
Right. Jensen mentioned that he sees a future where every company uses AI.
For everything, marketing, forecasting, even legal work.
So basically, AI becomes an integral part of everyday business.
Exactly. But he also said that inference comes with its own set of challenges.
Like what?
Well, you need high throughput to keep costs down and low latency for responsiveness. And on top of that, AI models need to handle more and more information to understand their tasks.
So it's not just about raw processing power anymore.
Nope, it's about intelligence, efficiency, and context. And that's where NVIDIA's architecture really shines. Their CUDA platform and the ecosystem around it allow for a lot of innovation in those areas.
So developers can focus on pushing AI forward, knowing that they have this rock-solid foundation.
Right. And speaking of pushing boundaries, Jensen also talked about physical AI.
Ah, AI that actually interacts with the real world.
Exactly. It's driving a surge in investments in industrial robotics.
I can imagine. AI that understands and interacts with the physical environment could be a game changer for manufacturing and logistics.
Right. It's like those sci-fi scenarios where robots and humans work together are becoming reality.
So how does NVIDIA fit into all of this?
Through their Omniverse platform. Think of it as a virtual world where developers can create, train, and operate these physical AI models.
Like a training ground for robots.
Kind of, yeah. It lets them learn from synthetic data and physics-based feedback, instead of just relying on human input.
That's smart. They can test and refine everything in a safe virtual environment before releasing it into the real world.
Exactly. And Jensen even gave an example of this in action. Foxconn, the world's biggest electronics manufacturer, is using Omniverse to optimize their factories.
Wow, real-world applications already. AI is truly reshaping industries as we speak.
And it's just the beginning. Think about the potential for healthcare, transportation, even space exploration.
It's mind-blowing. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need to talk about the potential challenges too.
Like those supply chain constraints we mentioned earlier.
Right, several analysts were concerned about NVIDIA's ability to meet the crazy demand for their products.
For example, Atif Malik from Citi pointed out the sequential decline in gaming revenue for Q4, which they attributed to supply chain issues. And Aaron Rakers from Wells Fargo asked about the drop in networking revenue.
So it's a balancing act for NVIDIA. They're trying to manage demand across all these different product lines.
Exactly, and it'll be interesting to see how they handle it all, especially as they ramp up production for Blackwell and move into new markets.
Okay, so let's backtrack a bit and revisit some of the other key takeaways from those analyst discussions.
Sure. Where should we start?
Well, what else stood out to you?
I thought Joseph Moore from Morgan Stanley's question about repurposing older Hopper chips for inference was interesting.
Ah, giving those old chips a new life in AI.
Exactly. It's a smart way to maximize the value of existing infrastructure, and it shows how flexible NVIDIA's architecture is.
It also highlights the growing need for affordable inference solutions as more and more companies adopt AI.
Absolutely. And remember the discussion about the possibility of a digestion period.
Right. Vivek Arya from Bank of America Securities brought that up. He was wondering if Nvidia expected any kind of slowdown after the initial wave of Blackwell deployments.
Yeah, and Jensen's answer was basically, nope.
He's confident that the demand for AI is strong enough to keep things moving.
Exactly. He said this shift to machine learning is so fundamental that demand will keep outpacing supply.
Bold prediction.
He believes that the $1 trillion worth of data centers out there need to be upgraded for AI, and that's going to fuel NVIDIA's growth for a while.
Sounds plausible. But remember, we were talking about risks earlier.
True, and there's one we haven't really touched on yet.
What's that?
Geopolitics.
Yeah, trade wars, global tensions, that kind of thing.
Exactly. We've already seen how export restrictions and tariffs can disrupt supply chains and hurt tech companies.
And with the U.S. and China at odds, things could escalate further, which would definitely impact NVIDIA.
Exactly. It's something to keep in mind, even if they didn't explicitly address it during the call.
It's a reminder that even in the fast-paced world of tech, politics can play a big role.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the last part of our deep dive. We'll explore the wider implications of NVIDIA's performance and what it all means for the future of AI.
NVIDIA is at the heart of this whole AI revolution, like they're holding the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, like gatekeepers almost. Remember Jensen's vision of AI factories?
Those massive data centers churning out intelligence.
It's happening even faster than we thought. These AI factories are popping up everywhere, driven by that huge demand we talked about.
And NVIDIA's right there, providing the building blocks.
Exactly. This quarter's results really prove they had the foresight, the ability to execute, but we have to zoom out a little, think bigger picture.
You mean the potential downsides?
Well, the ethical side of things. AI is getting more powerful, more widespread. We can't ignore the risks.
It's not just about the tech, it's about how it impacts society.
Right. We all have a responsibility here, developers, policymakers, businesses, everyone. We need to be having these conversations, figuring out ethical guidelines.
It's complex, definitely, but we have to navigate it together.
Couldn't agree more. And let's not forget their guidance for next quarter.
$37.5 billion in projected revenue, if I remember correctly.
Another huge jump, showing their momentum.
Right.
But is it sustainable? That's the question.
What challenges might they face?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Nobody's got a crystal ball.
True. But we could look at the trends, the demand for AI, that global race to build AI infrastructure, new applications like physical AI.
You're right. Those all point to continued success for NVIDIA. But the tech world is unpredictable.
What if new competitors popped up or new tech disrupts the market?
Exactly. So while we're optimistic, there's always uncertainty.
A balanced view is important for sure. So where does that leave us?
Well, this deep dive into NVIDIA's Q3 gave us a snapshot of where the AI revolution is right now.
We saw how AI is transforming industries, opening up new possibilities, but it also raises some big questions about our future.
And while NVIDIA is a leader in this space, the AI landscape is always changing.
So everyone listening, stay curious, keep learning, and join those conversations about AI's role in our world.
Because ultimately, the future of AI is in our hands.
That wraps up our deep dive into NVIDIA's Q3 earnings. A glimpse into the exciting and sometimes daunting world of AI.
Hope you found it insightful. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and keep learning.